Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is talk. Let's look at a few definitions. The first way this verb talk is used is to mean to speak in order to give information or express ideas or feelings. Another way this verb is used is to mean to converse or communicate by spoken words. Talk is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, all we need to do is add ing to the end. To make the past tense and participle forms, all we do is add ed to the end of the word. Because this verb ends in a voiceless k sound, the ed is going to make a t sound. Talked, talked. Let's look at some phrasal verbs using talk. And you might notice from my note on the screen that I'm going to discuss a few more than normal today because there are many phrasal verbs with talk. And I think it's possible you might hear these as you're out communicating with others, and I really want you to understand the meaning. The first phrasal verb we're going to look at is talk at. And the meaning for talk at is to talk to someone and not give them a chance to reply or listen to what they have to say. So generally, this doesn't feel really good for anyone. It does happen occasionally. Here's this phrasal verb in an example sentence. There's no point trying to convince them. They'll just talk at you until you give up. Another phrasal verb you might hear is talk back, and it means to respond rudely to an authority figure. So in this example, or for this particular phrasal verb, think about how children talk to their parents. Think about how children talk to their teachers. Generally, this is not something you want to do. But we're all probably a bit guilty of having done it at least once. I know I have. Here's an example sentence. The teacher was mad because the student talked back to her. So in this situation, perhaps the teacher said, stop talking to your friends and start reading your book, or gave some sort of encouragement, and the student mouths off or comes back with a complaint. Don't tell me what to do, something like that. That would be talking back, and generally not a great idea. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to talk someone down. And it could mean that you are convincing someone to lower the price on an object. This won't work for everything, but the first example that came to my mind dealt with cars, because that's something that generally is negotiated a great deal. Here it is in a sentence. I talked the salesperson down to sell me the used car for $10,000. So perhaps the person initially said, I want $12,000. There's some back and forth, and they agree on $10,000. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to talk down to. And it can mean that someone is speaking to another person in a way to show that the speaker is superior, is better, perhaps is more knowledgeable, but also not great to receive that either. I don't think anyone wants to be talked at or talked down to. But let's look at an example of talk down to. That boss talks down to his staff. No one likes him. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to talk someone into. And it means to persuade someone to do something. Here's an example. My friends talked me into staying out late. Let's continue looking at a few more phrasal verbs. The next one is going to connect to the last one. So we can talk someone into doing something, but we could also talk someone out of doing something. And here you're persuading someone not to do something. Another word you might not hear it quite as often, but it's dissuade. And again, you're encouraging someone not to act. Here's an example sentence. He was going to drive home after drinking half a bottle of wine, but his friends talked him out of it. So drinking and driving can be extremely dangerous. We don't want anyone to do that. We don't want others to have an accident or hurt themselves or other drivers that are out on the road. So here in this sentence, the friends don't do it. You shouldn't do this. This is a bad decision. And they were able to convince the person not to drive home after drinking. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to talk something over. And it means to discuss. Here it is in a sentence. Come into my office so we can talk this over. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to talk someone through. And it means that someone is being guided through an issue, maybe a problem. Here is an example sentence. The teacher talked me through the test, so I knew what to expect. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at is to talk something up. And it means to promote or advertise by saying good things to many people. Here's an example of that. My friend talked this book up, so now several people are reading it. Let's continue practice using talk, and we'll do it in a few different verb tenses. Today we'll look at past progressive, we'll look at simple present, and then present perfect. Let's start with past progressive. To make past progressive, we're going to use a past tense form of be, was or were, and then we'll use the ing form of the verb. Many times we use past progressive to describe an action that was in progress during a certain point in time. We might also use it to describe an action that was in progress when something else interrupted it. Here's an example. He was talking over his colleagues when I reminded him that everyone needs a chance to share. Here, this sentence describes a little different use of talk over, so it could be to talk while someone else is speaking. So that action was occurring when someone interrupts and says, hey, take a turn, let someone else talk. If we want to make negative past progressive, we need to insert not after our be verb. Here's an example. They were talking at the movie. So as the movie was shown, they weren't speaking. Another, I guess before we move to tenses, we should do a yes or no question. And to do that, we're going to start with our past tense form of be, then we'll have our subject, and then the ing form of the verb. Was he talking to his friend when the teacher asked him a question? Now let's move to simple present. In simple present, we tend to use this tense to talk about habits, routines, and facts. In the affirmative, the verb will change just a bit depending on what the subject is. If the subject here is I, you, we, or they, we'll use talk. But if our subject is he, she, or it, we need to add an S to the end of the base verb to make talks. Here's an affirmative sentence. She never talks back to her parents. If we want to make negative simple present, we're going to use either does not or do not. You might also hear the contractions, doesn't and don't. And after both of those, we'll use the base verb. Here's a sample sentence. I don't talk to my neighbors very often. If we want to make a yes or no question, we're going to start with do, then we'll have our subject, and then the base verb. If our subject is he, she, or it, we'll start the sentence with does, then the subject, then the base verb. Do they talk to their grandparents regularly? Finally, let's look at present perfect. To make present perfect, we're going to use have or has, and then the participle form, which is just the past tense form because this is a regular verb. Let's look at an affirmative sentence. They've talked every day for several years. So we tend to use present perfect to talk about something that started in the past and continues into the present. That seems to be what this sentence is describing. Let's look at negative next. To make negative present perfect, we're going to use have not or haven't, and then has not or hasn't, and then the participle form. Here's an example. He hasn't talked over his vacation plans with his boss. Finally, if we want to make a yes or no question in the present perfect, we'll start with have or has, then our subject, and then the participle form, the ed form of the verb in this case. Have we talked you into joining us this weekend? Next, let's talk about some words that relate to our verb talk. Talk can be a noun, and it can have a few different meanings. The first way the word talk gets used as a noun is to mean a conversation or discussion. Let's look at the first example. We need to have a talk about your behavior. So I can tell here that this is being used as a noun because I have the article a right before the word talk. Another meaning for talk is an informal address or lecture. You might think of this sort of similar to a speech, but perhaps a bit less formal. Here's an example. She gave a talk to 100 community members. Finally, the word talk as a noun could also be referring to rumors, gossip, or speculation. Here's an example of that. There's talk that the swimming pool is going to open next week. That's a little gossip going around my town right now. Another related word is talkative. It's an adjective that means fond of or given to talking. Another way to think of this, somebody who talks a great deal. Here's an example sentence. My best friend is really talkative. I don't think of talkative as necessarily being bad, but sometimes it could be used in sort of a negative way. Sometimes teachers, as they're talking about students, they might say the student tends to be talkative, and that could be disrupting other students. So it's not always a good quality or characteristic. The next word we're going to look at is walkie-talkie. It's a noun. It's a portable two-way radio. And I've got a picture on the bottom of the screen, so you can check that out. This is a tool that some professionals will use in their line of work. I have seen maintenance workers on my campus with walkie-talkies. Another industry that might use them, construction workers, and that's my example. Construction workers use walkie-talkies to communicate over large areas to keep each other safe. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Have a great day.